Okay, so the first thing I was working on this morning is the beginning of the design for the guide character in the museum project. The model's kind of where it's going to be, but I'm just kind of trying to design out what the textures are going to look like. So,
What are we looking at?
so this is the character that will act as sort of a hint bot. This will also be the character that's going to interface with people over social media. And essentially, it's going to be flying around with this character. Um,
Kind of like Baby Yoda.
yeah, exactly. Like it's the guide character. So in the journey, in the hero's journey, early on, the character usually comes in contact with a mentor or a guide. And so this character is acting in that role. And so in the game you'll get most of the narrative from that character, and you'll be accessing sort of that narrative in what we're calling the terminal, which will be a tab in the app. But as for an update, in the last video, I had talked about creating a really intuitive and easy use battle system, and I've kind of gone ahead and did that. Integrated some of those animations, and also sort of integrated that pointer that lets you know where the character should walk. So as I had previously mentioned, I wanted some sort of thing on the ground that shows where the character is. And another fun thing that I've put into place is the ability to run until a certain distance and then she starts walking again. That way, since the game is a lot of traveling and exploring, when you're doing long distances, it will run faster. And then this will kind of show the battle system. Yeah, and it's automated. So and this is the final form of the battle. So like you'll get these power ups as you play, but this is sort of what some of the end results will look like as you get all the different power ups. Yeah, so that's kind of an update from where we are. If we want to go a little bit more into the code, I can show a little bit of back end of what's happening with this character because it's kind of fun to see. Most of what's happening with the character is basically its own class, I believe is the term used. And inside that class, there's a good chunk of functions happening. Here are all of the variables. I really like to use the public variables because I like to control things on the fly. I think eventually I'll make these private just to be a little bit more in line with standards. But right now I'm using publics just so I can get to those variables easier and on the fly. Basically what's happening is I'm setting up a few different strings or connections to the attacks that are in the state machine. And so if we go in here and look at what's happening, Unity has this thing called the animator, which is basically a state machine for people like me who don't know how to actually script state machines. So essentially this is a state machine, and in between these transitions I'm calling to a function over here. And then basically that is being called within the code. So when I'm getting the animator, I'm looking for this string, which you'll see in like the transition. So walking, sprint, these right here are all the strings that I'm calling to during those functions. And then sort of the meat and potatoes of the control is here, sending out a raycast. When that raycast finds a plane, it sets that value as the point at which the character needs to move to. What's crucial about this is the nav mesh agent. It's really cool. Unity, Unreal has a very similar thing, nav mesh volume. Unity kind of has its own version of that, which is the nav mesh agent, and also sort of like a nav mesh bounds. So if we go into here and look at our navigation, this is where the character can move. And once these buildings have collisions, when I rebake this nav mesh area per se, it will not, this nav mesh agent, which is on the character. So if we go over to this character and look in its inspector, we actually have the nav mesh agent right here. And this nav mesh agent and the navigation happening on this ground plane are working together. This is sort of the character close up from the front. Oh my gosh. That's one thing that I never know how to get rid of. That highlight, there's probably something in the UI somewhere, but and so back to the script, just to show a little bit more. There were some funny things happening with the navigation, and Buxton and Robbie had to help me out with some of this math and logic, just to kind of get things working precisely, because we wanted to be able to switch between two different speeds, and we're addressing those speeds actually in that nav mesh agent. So if we look here on the actual nav mesh, we have these different acceleration and speeds, and this directly relates to how fast the whole nav mesh agent moves. The thing about that is the animations are they're set in place. So when it's playing the run or the walk, it's not actually transforming in position, and that's what the nav mesh agent was doing. And so that's why I set up all these public variables, so I could run the animations and make sure that the walk animation matches the speed at which the actual nav mesh is moving. And in order to get it to do that took some math that I don't know enough about, so my programmer buddies helped me out. So that is basically handling the movement. As you can see here, once again, we're calling to those, in the animator, we're calling to those strings and telling them to do something. Either yes or no, they're bools, so we're passing in a yes or no. And then here, this was kind of fun. This is what is basically setting up the automated battle system. Basically, there is a collision, and the collision is looking for these tags. I set it up with tags because I want to be able to do different animations for different types of enemies. So if we look actually on the enemy class or asset, whatever you like to call it. So if we look on this enemy class, there's a few things happening. There's a particle system that's being called to after a certain amount of hits. But if we notice, this tag is specifically enemy 1. That way I can run this same script with different, once again using public variables. So I can use this same script on all the enemies, but change the particle system and also change the tag. And then when we get a little bit further, we can add another basically nested if and call to a different tag, and then it will do a different set of animations depending on which tag, because if you see here it's saying attack is true. So if I were to create another set of animations, where another set of animations within this state machine. So like rather than going to attack 1, if I have attack 2, I can call to that attack 2 based on collision with a different tag here, a different enemy, which is really nice, which basically we're just setting it up so that you really don't have to do much, that you're just kind of exploring and fighting enemies only when they get in your way, and then of course doing a little bit of cleanup, resetting values at the end. And yeah, so this is only for this script is just for the actual character class. There's another script, as I kind of showed briefly, on the enemies,